The crowd inside the old arena buzzed with restless energy that night. Lights flashed, cameras rolled, and people from every corner filled the seats. They came to watch fists fly, sweat drip, and blood mix with the dirt on the mat. But no one in that place could have guessed how this night would turn out. The man in the center of it all, Keanu Reeves, sat in the third row, wearing a simple black jacket, jeans, and a cap pulled low over his kind eyes. He never came for violence. He came because he promised an old friend he'd show up. Keanu single quotes S. Friend was a man named Calvin Brooks, a retired war vet who had seen things no one should ever see. Calvin had fought for his country, lost his leg in a desert far away, and came back with scars inside and out. When the world turned its back on him, he didn't give up. Instead, he trained himself to fight with one leg, boxing and teaching other wounded vets that they still had strength in their bones. Tonight was Calvin's last charity match, a short exhibition to raise money for injured soldiers who needed help getting back on their feet. Calvin wasn't here to win. He was here to inspire. But the man standing across from Calvin inside that cage was no ordinary opponent. His name was Bruno Cade, an MMA fighter known for his brutal moves and dirty mouth. Bruno liked to hurt people and humiliate them. He called himself the Predator because he claimed no one could escape him. Bruno didn't care that Calvin had one leg. He didn't care that this fight was for charity. All he cared about was putting on a show that would make him look strong and cruel. When the announcer called Calvin's name, people stood up and clapped. They cheered for the old vet who limped to the center of the ring, head high, shoulders back. When they called Bruno's name, boos and cheers mixed together. Bruno threw his arms up like a king, then spat on the mat. Keanu watched him closely. He could feel something dark building behind Bruno's eyes. The bell rang. Calvin stepped forward, fists raised. Bruno circled him like a shark. The first few punches from Calvin landed soft but clean. People clapped and shouted his name. For a moment, it looked like Calvin could hold his own. But then Bruno changed. He started laughing. He backed up, dodged a swing, and then slammed his fist into Calvin's ribs so hard you could hear the crack. Calvin stumbled back but didn't fall. His eyes flashed with pain, but he stayed on his foot. Bruno walked around him, mocking him. "What's wrong, old man?" Bruno shouted loud enough for the whole arena to hear. "You gonna fall down like you did on the battlefield?" The crowd gasped. Even the ref looked shocked. Calvin tried to swing again, but Bruno knocked him down with a cruel kick to the side of his knee brace. Calvin hit the mat, breathing hard, clutching the leg that was never really there. Keanu stood up from his seat, his hands balled into fists inside his jacket pockets. People near him recognized him and tried to take pictures, but he didn't care. All he saw was his friend, broken and humiliated on the floor. Bruno walked over, leaned down, and whispered something in Calvin's ear that made him close his eyes in shame. Then Bruno looked up and shouted, "This is what happens to heroes. They come home and beg for pity." Some people booed. Others were silent. Calvin pushed himself up with his gloved hands, trying to stand, but Bruno slapped him across the head and shoved him back down. The ref tried to step in, but Bruno waved him off. The match was over, but Bruno wasn't done. He pointed at the crowd and laughed. "Anyone else want to step in? Come on, come teach me some respect." And that's when Keanu walked toward the cage. The security guards hesitated. The crowd roared in disbelief. They knew that face. They knew that walk, but they didn't know what he was about to do. Keanu opened the cage door himself. He didn't say a word. He helped Calvin sit up against the side, checked his eyes, and whispered something only Calvin could hear. Calvin nodded, tears forming at the corner of his eyes. Then Keanu turned around to face Bruno. The arena fell dead silent, like the whole world was holding its breath. Keanu took off his jacket and dropped it on the mat. Bruno laughed. "What you gonna do, Hollywood? You think you can fight me? You think your movies make you a man?" He stepped closer, towering over Keanu, flexing his tattooed arms. Keanu just stared back, his face calm, his eyes dark with something the Predator had never seen before. Not fear, not anger, Something deeper. Something that said, "You went too far." The ref tried to speak, but Keanu raised one hand. The ref stepped back. Bruno swung first. A cheap shot right at Keanu's face, but Keanu moved like water, slipping aside and catching Bruno's wrist. The next thing anyone saw was Bruno's arm twisted behind his back, his knee slammed into the mat, and Keanu standing over him, whispering words no microphone could catch. The arena erupted. People stood, screaming his name. Phones filmed every second. But Keanu didn't care. He leaned down, locked eyes with Bruno, and said, "Heroes deserve respect. Tonight, you learn that the hard way." And in that single moment, the Predator realized he wasn't the strongest man in that cage. Not tonight. Bruno Cade's shoulder pressed hard against the mat as Keanu held his arm twisted behind him. The crowd went wild, people shouting and clapping, but Bruno's eyes were wide with something he had not felt in years: fear. He tried to push back, muscles straining, but Keanu's grip was unbreakable. For the first time, the Predator looked like prey. Keanu leaned close to Bruno's ear. His voice was calm, but sharp like a knife cutting through thick pride. "You think hurting people makes you strong?" he asked, his breath steady. "You think mocking a man who gave everything for people like you makes you better?" Bruno spat on the mat but said nothing. He tried to wriggle free, but Keanu pressed down harder. "Listen," Keanu said, his voice low. "Tonight you apologize. You stand up, you help Calvin to his feet, and you say sorry to every person who's ever been made to feel small." Bruno grunted, face red, but something in him cracked. The crowd's roar turned to silence, waiting for what would happen next. Calvin, still sitting by the cage wall, watched with tired eyes, his breath shallow but his spirit bright. He had known Keanu for years, the man who never wanted a spotlight but never turned away from doing right. Keanu let go of Bruno's arm. The big fighter stumbled forward, grabbing his shoulder. For a second he thought of turning and swinging again, but he saw Keanu's eyes, calm, strong, and unafraid. Bruno looked down at Calvin. His lips trembled. Then, in a rough voice that cracked in the microphone, he said, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I said, and what I did." People in the stands cheered softly at first, then louder. Some clapped, some wiped their eyes. Calvin gave a slow nod. "Be better," he said to Bruno, his voice soft but clear. Bruno helped Calvin up, one arm around his waist. Calvin leaned on him. It was a strange sight. The Predator holding the hero like a brother. The cage door opened and medics came in to help Calvin out. Keanu stayed behind in the ring. He picked up Calvin's fallen gloves and handed them to one of the trainers. The arena lights shone on him like a spotlight, but Keanu didn't stand tall for applause. He stood there because he knew the real fight wasn't just in the cage. It was outside too, in every street, every home, every heart where respect was forgotten. As Calvin was carried away, the announcer didn't know what to say. The next fight on the card was canceled. No one wanted to see more punches thrown after what they had witnessed. Instead, people stayed in their seats, hoping for one more glimpse of Keanu. The cameras focused on him as he walked to the microphone. "Stand," he cleared his throat and spoke in that quiet, steady way that made people lean in to hear every word. "It's easy to hurt people," he said. "It's easy to mock someone who can't fight back. But real strength is standing up for those who've been knocked down. Real strength is knowing when to protect, not destroy." He looked straight into the camera lens so that people at home would feel his eyes on them too, every day. Someone out there is fighting a battle you don't see. Maybe they're missing a leg. Maybe they're missing hope. Don't be the person who makes that battle harder. The arena was so quiet you could hear the hum of the lights above. Keanu bowed his head once, stepped away from the mic, and left the cage. The crowd parted for him, clapping, patting him on the back, whispering his name like it was a prayer. Outside, Calvin sat on a stretcher, a blanket around his shoulders. Keanu crouched beside him. "You did good," Keanu said, smiling. Calvin chuckled weakly. "I didn't even last 2 rounds." "It wasn't about the rounds," Keanu said. "It was about showing up. You showed up. You always do." Calvin's eyes misted. He looked away so the cameras wouldn't catch him crying. "Promise me something," he said. "Anything." Keanu answered, "Don't let what happened tonight be just a story. Make sure people remember what respect looks like." Keanu nodded. "I promise." As the ambulance doors closed, Keanu stood outside the arena, the night air cool on his face. A few fans came for pictures, and he smiled for each one, but his mind was already somewhere else, thinking about every fighter out there, not in cages, but in real life, who needed someone to stand up when they couldn't. He knew tonight was only the beginning. The real fight was waiting, and somewhere deep inside, Keanu felt something awaken, a promise he would keep, no matter what it cost him. The night after the fight, videos of Keanu stepping into the ring spread like wildfire. News sites, social media, and even morning talk shows showed the same clip, Bruno mocking Calvin, then Keanu twisting his arm and making him say sorry. Millions watched and felt something stir inside them. For some, it was respect. For others, it was shame for times they stayed silent. But for Keanu, it was just the first spark. In his small apartment, Keanu sat on the edge of his bed, phone buzzing with endless calls. Producers wanted interviews. Studios wanted to use the moment to promote new films. Agents asked him to turn it into a big show. But Keanu ignored them all. He only cared about one thing, Calvin. Early that morning, he drove across the city to visit Calvin at the Veterans Hospital. The halls smelled like disinfectant and old paint. Nurses nodded at Keanu when he passed, whispering his name. He found Calvin in a simple room, leg propped up, eyes staring out the window. "Hey," Keanu said, pulling up a chair. Calvin turned, a grin spreading across his bruised face. "Superstar," Calvin joked. "The internet loves you. It's not about me," Keanu said. He handed Calvin a small bag of books and a fresh notebook. "How's the leg? Hurts?" "Like hell," Calvin said, laughing softly. "But it's worth it. You see the news?" Keanu nodded. "Yeah, people are talking, but talking's not enough." Calvin's smile faded. "What are you thinking?" Keanu leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I'm thinking there are more Brunos out there. People who bully the weak. People who disrespect the ones who protect them. And there are more Calvins too. Men and women who come home broken and feel forgotten. And," Calvin asked, "and maybe it's time we fight a different kind of fight." Keanu said, "One that doesn't end when the bell rings." Over the next few weeks, Keanu did something no one expected. He used his fame not for movies but for truth. He started visiting shelters where homeless vets slept on cold floors. He met with families who had lost soldiers and never got the help they deserved. He spoke at small schools, telling kids that strength wasn't about fists or fame. It was about standing up when it was easier to stay down. At first, people thought it was just good publicity. But when they saw him waiting in long lines at free clinics, carrying boxes at food banks, and sitting on the sidewalk talking to people who smelled of sweat and sorrow, they knew it was real. Meanwhile, Bruno Cade disappeared. Some said he flew overseas to train. Others said he went to a quiet place to find the man he had lost. But no one knew for sure. All they knew was that the predator was silent now. And in his silence, others found their voices. One night, Keanu stood in a dusty gym that smelled like iron and sweat. He watched a young man with a prosthetic arm throw punches at a bag. The kid was good, sharp jabs, strong kicks, but his eyes looked hollow, like he was fighting ghosts that never left him alone. Keanu walked over. "You've got talent," he said. The kid shrugged. "So what?" "So you can teach others," Keanu said. "Show them what you know." The kid dropped his gloves, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Nobody cares about guys like me. They only care when someone like you shows up." Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then let's make them care all the time." And that's when the idea was born. A new kind of gym. Not just for fighters, but for broken souls who needed a safe place to stand tall again. Keanu called Calvin that night. "We're gonna build it," he said. "A place where no one mocks a hero, where no one laughs at scars." Calvin's laughter through the phone was the strongest sound Keanu had heard in years. "Count me in," Calvin said. "But you know you're gonna have to fight again, right?" to keep the wolves away. Keanu smiled, staring out the window at the city lights. Then I'll fight. But even Keanu didn't know how big this fight would become. Because deep in the shadows, a few people watched his every move. People who didn't like what he stood for. People who would do anything to keep the weak weak and the powerful cruel. And they were about to test just how far Keanu would go to keep his promise. 2 months after the night in the ring, the abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city buzzed with new life. Inside, the echo of punching bags, ropes whipping, and feet sliding across mats filled the old walls with hope instead of silence. They called it the Stand. It was Calvin's idea to name it that, a place where people made their stand, no matter how broken they came in. Keanu walked through the gym every morning before the sun rose. He helped mop the floor, hang new gloves, and greet everyone who stepped inside. No cameras, no press, just him and Calvin, and a few volunteers who believed in second chances. The first week, a handful of vets showed up, some missing limbs, some missing hope. The next week, more came, mothers with lost sons, teenagers tired of getting beaten in the streets, even old men who had fought wars long forgotten. Keanu taught them all what he knew, not just how to fight, but how to stand tall when the world tried to push them down. His lessons were simple. Protect your own. Respect your enemy. Never throw the first punch, but never back down when the punch comes. But for every person they lifted up, there was someone watching from the shadows, wanting to drag them back down. News started to spread, stories about how the Stand was helping people who others ignored. But some local gym owners, fighters who made money training rich kids and criminals, didn't like it. They said Keanu was stealing their business, giving losers a place they didn't deserve. Rumors spread that the Stand was weak, a charity circus with no real fight in it. One night, as Keanu locked up the front gate, he heard footsteps behind him. 3 men stood there, thick necks, tattoos crawling up their arms, eyes cold with cheap anger. The leader, a fighter named Diesel, stepped forward. Diesel had fought in underground rings where blood spilled for fun. His nose was broken so many times it bent left like a crooked road. Hollywood hero, Diesel said, spitting on the sidewalk. You think you're saving these people? You're making them soft. Keanu didn't flinch. He closed the gate and slid the padlock into place. They don't need to be hard, Keanu said. They need to know they're worth something. Diesel chuckled. Worthless dogs, vets, beggars, junkies. They're only good for getting stepped on. Keanu's eyes narrowed. Leave. Tonight's not the night. But Diesel stepped closer. Or what? You gonna put on your movie face and scare me? The other two laughed. Diesel shoved Keanu in the chest. Fight me, Hollywood. Prove you can protect them. Keanu sighed. He looked up at the sky, the streetlight flickering overhead. He hated fighting outside the cage. Hated violence when words could do better. But he saw Diesel's eyes, saw there were no words left. Keanu dropped his bag to the ground. One time, he said, then you leave them alone. Diesel swung first, a wild punch aimed at Keanu's jaw. But Keanu moved like wind slipping. Through trees, he ducked, stepped to the side, and slammed his elbow into Diesel's ribs. The crack echoed on the empty street. Diesel gasped, but swung again. Keanu caught his wrist, twisted, and used Diesel's own weight to send him crashing to the concrete. The other two lunged, but Keanu dropped one with a knee to the gut and the other with a quick jab to the throat. Diesel tried to stand, blood on his lips. This ain't over, he hissed. Keanu grabbed his shirt, pulled him close. It is if you want to walk away, he said, voice calm as ever. Next time you come for them, you come for me. Diesel saw something in Keanu's eyes, that deep, endless calm. It scared him more than fists or knives ever could. He crawled back, dragging the others with him. Cursing under his breath, Keanu stood there until they disappeared into the night. Then he picked up his bag, rubbed his knuckles, and breathed deep. He didn't like hurting people, but he would do it again if he had to. Inside the gym, Calvin was waiting. He had watched through the dusty window. They'll come back, Calvin said. Keanu nodded. Then we'll stand again. But Calvin frowned. What if you can't be here every time? He asked. What if they come when you're gone? Keanu looked around the gym, the old mats, the second-hand gear, the bruised but smiling faces training in the morning light. Then we teach them to stand without me, he said. And we find more people willing to fight the right fight, outside. A small camera hidden under a streetlight blinked red. Somewhere far away, someone watched the footage of Keanu's fight. They leaned back in their chair, fingers drumming on a desk. They didn't care about Diesel. They didn't care about the stand. They cared about Keanu, the man who made people believe they could be strong. And people like him were dangerous. The next move wouldn't be a street fight. It would be something bigger, something that would test not just Keanu's fists, but his spirit too. The sun rose slow and dull the next morning, but the stand was already alive. Keanu walked in with his old bag over his shoulder, greeting everyone by name. They were there, the kid with the prosthetic arm, the mother who boxed to feel safe. Again, the old vet teaching footwork to teenagers who never had fathers. Each person looked at Keanu like he was more than just a man, like he was the wall. That kept their monsters out. But walls can be tested. That afternoon, a woman came to the gym. She wore a sharp suit, hair pulled back tight, eyes hidden behind dark glasses. She stood at the front desk, tapping her pen on a clipboard. "I'm looking for Mr. Reeves," she said to Calvin, who was sitting behind the desk. Calvin looked up, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Who wants to know?" The woman flashed a badge, but it wasn't police. It was from a big fight promotion company, the same company that used to sponsor Bruno Cade. "We have a business offer," she said. Calvin called Keanu over. Keanu wiped his hands on a towel, nodded politely. "Can I help you?" he asked. The woman looked around at the dusty walls, the patched punching bags. "You've got quite the operation here," she said. "To bet it's so small." Keanu crossed his arms. "We're not looking for sponsors. You should," she said. "This place needs money. You need better gear, more security, more trainers. We can give you that." Calvin narrowed his eyes. "And what do you want in return?" The woman smiled. It was the kind of smile that hides a knife. "You get in the ring again. Real fights, big pay-per-view events. People want to see you fight for real, not just charity scraps. And when you win, you bring eyes to our brand." Keanu shook his head. "No deal." But the woman leaned closer. "Don't be foolish," she said. "You think you can protect these people forever on your own. You're just an actor with some moves. You can't stop what's coming." Keanu's face stayed calm, but inside, a storm was building. "We don't sell our soul for safety," he said. "Get out." The woman snapped her folder shut. "This was a courtesy," she said. "Next time we won't ask nicely." When she left, Calvin sighed. "Trouble," he muttered. Keanu looked around the gym, at every life they had saved piece by piece. "We'll handle it," he said. But that night, trouble came faster than they expected. Someone broke into the stand after hours. They smashed the windows, tore down the heavy bags, spray-painted the walls with threats. "Weak dogs." One wall read, "No place for heroes." Keanu showed up before sunrise. He stood in the broken glass, looking at the words dripping red down the walls. Calvin came up behind him, breathing heavy on his crutches. "They want you to leave," Calvin said. Keanu picked up a fallen glove from the floor. "Then we stay." For 2 days, volunteers worked to fix the place. People who barely had money chipped in for new locks, new gear. The local news caught wind of it and sent reporters. Keanu gave them a simple statement: the stand is not a building. It's every person who refuses to give up. But the people behind the threats didn't stop. They sent fighters to the parking lot to scare people away. They spread lies online, saying the stand was a scam to get money from broken soldiers. Some donors pulled out. Keanu's phone buzzed day and night with hate, people calling him a fraud. But every time he wanted to lose hope, he'd look at Calvin, at the kid with the prosthetic arm, at the mother who could finally sleep through the night, and he'd remember what the fight was for. Then one night, Calvin's phone rang. It was Bruno Cade. Bruno's voice was low, rough like gravel. "We need to meet," he said. Calvin told Keanu, and they both drove to a rundown bar on the edge of town. Bruno was there, sitting alone. No entourage, no cameras, He looked thinner, eyes sunk deep, but there was something real in his stare. "You made me see who I was," Bruno said to Keanu. "You broke me that night, and you saved me too." Keanu said nothing. He just listened. Bruno leaned forward. "The people after you now, they're bigger than me. They run underground fights, gambling rings, fake charities. They hate what you're doing because you're taking money from them." "Why are you telling us this?" Calvin asked. "Because I owe you," Bruno said. "And because I want to stand for something good for once." Keanu reached across the table, shook Bruno's hand. "Then stand with us." Bruno's eyes flickered with doubt. "They'll come for you harder now," he warned. Keanu's single quotes S voice was calm, but the promise was clear. Let them come. Because now it wasn't just about fists and cages. Now, it was about showing the world that sometimes the worst can choose to fight for the best. And somewhere, in the shadows, the people who pulled the strings smiled coldly. They were ready to push Keanu to the edge, and they didn't care who got hurt along the way. The next morning, the stand felt different. The broken windows were patched, the heavy bags hung, but the air was tight like a storm waiting to break. People came in, looking over their shoulders. They heard the rumors that someone was coming to shut them down for good. Keanu stood in the center of the floor. Calvin sat beside him on his crutches. Bruno Cade leaning against the wall, arms crossed but eyes honest for once in his life. The three of them knew one thing. Tonight would be a line they'd have to cross together. Keanu called everyone close. The mothers, the teens, the vets with scars no one could see. His voice was soft but carried through the room. "If you want to leave, do it now. No shame in protecting your family. No shame in stepping away." No one moved. The mother with bruised knuckles raised her chin. The teen with the stitched eyebrow clenched his fists. Even the old man with the cane stood a little straighter. Keanu smiled. "Then tonight we stand." As dusk fell, black cars parked at the end of the street. Men in suits stepped out, their eyes cold like wolves, searching for a weak spot. Diesel was there too, bruises from his last run-in, with Keanu still purple under his jaw. But this time he didn't look so sure of himself. The leader of the men was someone new, a tall man in a dark coat with a voice that dripped poison. He stepped into the parking lot, stared at the gym's glowing sign. "Bring him out," he ordered. Diesel hesitated, then pounded on the front door. Keanu opened it himself. "You got business?" he asked calmly. The leader smiled thin. "We warned you. You kept talking about respect and heroes. But this world isn't built on kindness, Reeves. It's built on fear. So tonight we remind you who holds the leash." Calvin came to Keanu's side. "You want him, you go through all of us." The leader waved his hand. Diesel stepped forward, knuckles cracking. But then something unexpected happened. Bruno stepped out from behind Keanu, face set like stone. He stood between Diesel and Keanu. "Not tonight," Bruno said. Diesel barked a laugh. "Move, predator." But Bruno didn't move. "I'm not the predator anymore," he said. "He showed me that." The leader's eyes narrowed. "Then you fall with him." He snapped his fingers. The men in suits moved fast, fists, elbows, boots slamming into the group. The parking lot turned into chaos. Bruno blocked Diesel's swing, driving him back into a car. Calvin swung his crutch like a bat, knocking one man to the ground. Keanu fought like the wind, fluid, sharp, unstoppable. Every time someone lunged at him, he turned their weight against them, sending them crashing down. But even Keanu couldn't be everywhere. He saw Diesel break free and rush the gym door. Inside, the mother and the teens were trying to hold the door shut. Keanu shoved past two men, reached Diesel just as he kicked the door in. "Get back," Keanu shouted. Diesel turned, fist swinging, but Keanu caught him in the ribs, then the jaw. Diesel went down hard, breath knocked from his lungs. The people inside pulled the door shut again. Behind Keanu, Bruno slammed the last suited man onto the hood of a car. Calvin leaned against the wall, out of breath but still grinning. The leader stood alone now, realizing his wolves had fallen. Keanu walked toward him. "This place will stand long after you're gone," he said. The leader hissed, "They'll come again." And again. Keanu shook his head. and we'll stand again and again. The leader's lip curled. One day, you'll be too tired to fight. Keanu's voice was calm, but his eyes burned like stars in a dark sky. One day, maybe, but not tonight. He stepped aside as Bruno grabbed the leader by the collar and dragged him away from the gym. The rest of the neighborhood watched from windows, phones filming, kids cheering as the cars drove off into the night. When it was done, Keanu walked back inside the gym. People circled him, touching his shoulders, hugging him tight. Calvin sat on a bench, crutch leaning against his leg, eyes wet. "You did it," Calvin said. Keanu shook his head. "We did it." He looked at Bruno, who nodded back. The next morning, a news truck showed up. People wanted the story, how an old warehouse became a fortress of hope. They wanted to know how a movie star became a real fighter for the broken. But Keanu didn't stand for cameras. He stood for every person who ever felt small. He spoke 3 simple words into the microphone: "Heroes stand together." And that's how the stand stayed alive, not because one man fought, but because he made others believe they could too. Every bruise, every scar, every night of fear, they wore them like medals. Proof that kindness is stronger than fists when it stands tall and never bows. And Keanu? He stayed at the door every night, the quiet protector, ready for the next fight, but always hoping there would be none. Because real strength isn't in breaking bones, it's in healing hearts. And that is how respect won in a world that forgot it once, but will never forget it again.